Now we shall move on to the last event of this conference, right? Now, this is a talk, this is our international speaker, right? And he's going to talk about something which is very important and very dear to us, because we do not want to be in this position, in this situation, a failed situation, especially in terms of airway management. Because for us, the airway management, or regardless of whether you use the conventional laryngoscope or video laryngoscope, we do not want to what you call face failure. But anyway, we do sometimes face failure. And he's going to talk about this failed video laryngoscopy, what to do next. But before that, I would like to give you all a brief introduction about Dr. Paulo CV, right? Okay. Paulo San Pedro, right? Now, he is actually an anesthesiologist practicing in many hospitals. Yeah, Metro North Medical Center, Metro Antipolo Hospital, and Marikina Doctors Hospital. Right? He graduated in as a medical officer basically in 2004, but he went into anesthesiology residency in the Philippines General Hospital from 2006-2008, right? And he has been a professional affiliates in all actually airway management society. So he's very apt. He's the appropriate person to talk about airway management. He's the president, currently president of the Philippine Airway Management Society. He's the director of Airway Academy, member Society of Airway Management, member of the European Airway Management Society, member of the Philippine Society of Anesthesiologists and Philippine Medical Association. He has been invited to many lectures in many congresses giving talks regarding airway management, all right? So he will address us to tell us about failed video laryngoscopy, what to do next. With that, I would like to invite Dr. Paulo San Pedro to the stage to give his talk.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here, and thank you for the generous introduction. So today we'll talk about failed video laryngoscopy. So almost everyone is using video laryngoscopy. A lot of time we use it as a rescue, but what if it fails, okay? What to do next? So just a disclosure, I work with Storz. As mentioned, I'm an anesthesiologist, but I rarely do whole cases nowadays. My practice mainly revolves on difficult airway. So when other doctors failed their airway management, they call me in. Usually they reschedule the case and then I manage the airway. So that's my practice back home. So as mentioned earlier, I founded the Philippine Airway Management Society last year. And this year, we organized the ASEAN Special Interest Group in Airway Management. Okay. So failed video laryngoscopy. So we will discuss about the can see, can't intubate scenario. Have you experienced this? You can see the vocal cords, but you cannot push down the tube. I think most of the failed VL is because of this one. Okay. Next is the can't see. And then the next is the can't intubate, cannot oxygenate scenario. Okay. Is this video familiar to you? So the first time I saw this video, I said, oh, this is the operating room. Okay? When we intubate, cannot see, what do we do next? Laryngoscopy. And then, what do we do next? Call someone, call for help, what will he do? Laryngoscopy. It's the same thing. We're not doing anything, right? And if we look at the studies, this is complications for multiple attempts. We see that hypoxemia, just more than 2 attempts, 9 times. Cardiac arrest, 7 times. So it's very significant, the increase if we have more attempts in intubation. And from time and time again, we define insanity as doing something over and over again, expecting a different result. This is exactly what we're doing. Doing the same thing, expecting a different result. Okay? So if we're doing intubation, for example, we're doing DL, what do we need to do? So one is we change the blade, right? Maybe if we're using a Mach 3, we use a Mach 4, or we use a Miller. We also change how we use the blade, or the adjuncts, how we use the bougie, how we use the stylet, laryngeal manipulation, and maybe we change the position of the patient. Okay, so every time we make an attempt, we have to consider this. Okay, am I going to do the same thing, or am I going to change something different with this one? Okay, so we move towards visual laryngoscopy. So how many of you have experienced this? Can see, cannot intubate. Okay, so almost half of the group. So it's very frustrating, right? Okay, so what could we do? It's the same thing. We could change the blade, the technique on how we're using the blade, bougie or stylet. A lot of people think if I have a difficult airway, I use the bougie. Okay? But the thing is, what do you use every day will most likely give you a successful result. Okay? So people feel frustrated. I use a bougie, I could not intubate. But the thing is, he only used the bougie during difficult intubation. So he's not used to it. So if you're going to rely on bougie, you have to practice it also every day. Okay? Also patient positioning. So we'll discuss this each in the succeeding slides. So why do you think it happens? You can see it, but you cannot intubate. The thing is, if you look at the picture, you see the direction of the white arrow. That's the direction of your airway. Okay? If you're using a hyperangulated blade, the direction of the ET tube is represented by the yellow arrow. Okay? So it's not aligned. So when you push the ET tube, you're actually pushing against the wall of the airway, not going down the trachea. Okay? So this is the main reason. So the easiest is, as I mentioned, this is on hyperangulated blade. So you could use the classic blade. You could use a Macintosh or a Miller. So in a lot of publication, they mentioned that they were using hyperangulated blade. They could not intubate the patient, but they could see they shifted to a classic blade, classic VL blade, and they were able to intubate the patient. This is something you could also do. Okay. Next thing is how you position the blade. A lot of us will see, oh, that's nice. The picture on the right, it's a very nice picture of the vocal cords. I could see it very big. The problem is we're too deep. Okay? We cannot see the ET tube coming in. Okay? So it's hard to manipulate the ET tube when we're too deep. So ideally, I go to the vallicula. Okay? So I do step-by-step laryngoscopy. I follow the tongue until I reach the vallicula. If I can go to the vallicula, I go to the vallicula. Okay, that will give me enough space to maneuver my ET tube. So a good Cormack-Lahin score in VL doesn't equate to easy intubation. Okay, so sometimes you have to increase your Cormack-Lahin score in order to facilitate intubation. Okay, so now we're in the vallicula. So even if we're in the vallicula, sometimes we push too much. Okay, we're pushing too much. So try to relax your hand a little bit. Okay, so when you see the cricoid ring, this is called the Kovac sign. It means you're pushing too much. Okay, so try to relax. So most people will recommend 50% POGO score. So you only have to see 50% of the vocal cords when you're doing visual laryngoscopy, so that the insertion of the ET tube is easier. Okay? So when you insert also the ET tube, so when you pass the vocal cords already, and when you insert the ET tube, do not insert the stylet with it. Okay? A lot of times we're using a rigid stylet. So steady the stylet, and then just push the ET tube. Okay, because it's rigid, it's hard to push down. Okay. Next is, most of the time we're using hockey stick, right? So remember the picture earlier, the airway goes down. So we have to make the ET tube goes up. But if you're using a hockey stick, the ET tube goes up. Okay? So what we should do is when you push down, you make the ET tube go down. Okay? So you twist it. So I twist it. Okay? So there's something they call the reverse loading. So they load the ET tube opposite when they put it in the stylet. But a lot of times when you do that, while waiting to intubate, the ET tube turns. So for me, I just load it normally, and then when I'm pushing, that's the time I twist. Okay, so that is push facing downward. So your ET tube doesn't go up, but when you twist, it goes down. So it follows the airway of the patient. Okay? So it's a very easy trick, very simple, but very helpful. My last maneuver is the neck flexion. Okay? So they did some study, it actually helps. I've been doing this way before the video laryngoscope was a common use. So what happens? So this is the normal position for intubation, right? When we flex the neck, okay, it aligns. Okay? So it's no longer pushing up. It's going, the ET tube will be going down. You know, I've been teaching this for a long time, but most of the maneuvers earlier, the intubation is successful. It only happens to be once that I could not push down. So it was last January. I have to ask my assistants to flex the neck. It was very satisfying when the ET tube goes down. Okay? So cannot push down. Okay, please flex the neck. And then, resistance was lost, push down. Very successful. So what will happen is, so you're trying to push down, you cannot. So you flex the neck, you will lose the view. Okay? That's okay. So remember, the tip of your ET tube is already inside. Okay? So it's okay to lose the view. So when you flex the neck, you lose the view, but you feel the loss of resistance to push down the ET tube. And then after pushing down the ET tube, you revert back to your intubating position and check if it's really inside. Okay? So it's important to check. Okay? Just check if the ET tube is actually between the vocal cords. Okay? So after that is okay. Another technique, but this one is kind of unique to one video laryngoscope because they have the channel at the side. I put a bougie in there. Okay? So, for example, this case, this is a 24-year-old female with chemical burn. Actually, this one is a battered wife. So the husband was the one who poured the acid on the face of the patient. So eventually the patient has 1/2 inch, 1 inch mouth opening. Then the resident called me for referral. I asked him what he will do. He said, flexible. But how many flexible have you had? None. So if you have no experience, probably you will fail. So I asked the resident to load the bougie on the ET tube. So this is what he did. Okay. So in this part, he is having a problem pushing down the bougie. Okay. So what's the problem? So what I said earlier, so he's pressed into the vallicula so much. So it will be easier to pull back a little bit. But in fairness, this was a new doctor, a very difficult airway. He was able to intubate. So overall, congratulations to him. But this is another option that you could teach your young ones. So especially in the OT, they don't have the flexible at night. Usually it's closed, right? They keep it, don't have access. So it's an option for the young ones to do. Okay. Now, next problem. You cannot see. What do you do if you cannot see anything? Okay. So if you look at the airway algorithms, if you cannot see, most of the time we proceed to SGA, right? We put the SGA in. But personally, I have my own algorithm. Before going to the SGA, I use an optical stylet. Okay? I love optical stylet because it's very good. The thing is, a lot of the difficult airways, most of the time, it could easily be fixed with an optical stylet. A lot of the surgical airway that they do, sometimes they don't need to do that if they have an optical stylet. Okay? So how do we do this? So there's a lot of ways to use the optical stylet. But in our scenario, which is we're using video laryngoscopy and then we cannot see it, we use it together with the blade. Okay? So we don't remove the blade. And then we insert the optical stylet. Okay? So how do we do this? Okay? So we took this video last year in Ampang. Okay? Okay, so we insert the video laryngoscope. Okay? So for example, we don't see much. Okay? We cannot intubate the patient. Okay? Okay? So we get an optical stylet, we insert it. It's a stylet. Okay? The only difference is you could see what's on the tip. Okay? So it means that you could go beyond the view of the VL. So even if the view of the VL is not sufficient, we could still intubate the patient. So it was very easy to see the vocal cords, even if you have a Cormac-Lehane 3 on the video laryngoscope. Okay? So what are the advantages? It's very easy to use. It's ergonomic because every day we hold the laryngoscope stylet, right? Only difference, this is a high-tech stylet that you could see what's on the tip. So for example, for this case, this one, they actually did the poor pre-op on the patient. So they didn't assess that the patient has immovable neck. Okay? So this is a young doctor, first year. So he couldn't see Cormac-Lehane 4. So she called me to help her. So I just took the optical stylet. So I'm using a direct laryngoscope. I didn't have to use a VL. So I just go beyond the view of the laryngoscope, and I was able to see. It's very easy. Okay. It's also easy to use. So a lot of people think it's hard to use the optical stylet because they use the retromolar, they use the midline approach. These are all fancy approaches of using the optical stylet. But you could use it at a combination technique. So for example, this one is a pediatric. Anubis pediatric. This is a new doctor who is using the optical stylet for the first time. See, it's in a difficult case. First time user, you use the combination, very easy. Okay? So it's not hard to learn. Okay? Also, it's endoscopy. Sometimes it gets confusing. But if you see a blade in the middle, the blade, it creates space for us to work. Also, at the same time, this one, it's not even a VL. This is a direct laryngoscope. I'm using a Bonfils here. No, I'm teaching someone to use the Bonfils here. So, difficult airway, Cormac-Lehane 4. This is a status post mandibulectomy, so there's no jaw. Basically, cannot do a jaw thrust, there's no jaw. So when they did the laryngoscopy, you have no bone to hold the soft tissue up, so everything falls down. Okay, so when everything falls down, it's hard to see, right? But it's easy to search for it using a optical stylet. Okay, so last case for the optical stylet. What I like about this is I could do it alone. Okay, I'll show you later. If you don't have an optical stylet, you could use a flexible. Flexible need 2 people. Optical stylet just 1. So this case is a meningocele with cerebral agenesis, ASD, PDA, clubfoot, short immovable neck, small mouth opening, and on the day of the OT or the operation, the patient developed COVID. So you could see on the picture there on the VL on the corner, that's the view of the VL. Okay, you cannot see anything with the VL. Okay, so as a rescue, optical stylet, you could see the vocal cords very clearly on the view of the optical stylet. Okay, and now what I like about the optical stylet is you have an oxygen port. Okay, so your scenario, you cannot intubate. If you have oxygen, it gives you more time to manage the airway. So you're not that rushed, you're not panicking. So I did a few studies. So for example, for this one, picture on that side, I'm using the optical stylet without apneic oxygenation. Okay? On this side, I'm using apneic oxygenation. Okay? So you will notice on that side, after 2 minutes, the animals is starting to desaturate. Okay? On this side, still no desaturation. So actually, I wait until 10 minutes, still no desaturation. So 10 minutes I stop because I'm already tired. So it gives you time. So you're not panicking. You know the patient will not desaturate immediately. Also, when you're learning, you're more concentrated on learning. You're not worrying, is the patient desaturating already? I have to stop this. So it's a good way of delivering apneic oxygenation. Okay? So now, if you don't have optical stylet, because a lot of hospitals doesn't have optical stylet, right? So an option is to use a flexible scope. Okay, so this is called the video-assisted flexible scope. Actually, they call it many things. They call it hybrid intubation, multimodal, dual endoscopy, dual screen. So, but the most common and I think the most appropriate name is the video-assisted flexible intubation. So how do you do it? You do the laryngoscopy, same thing, okay? And then once you're happy with the view of the laryngoscope, you pass the laryngoscope to your assistant, okay? Okay, so the assistant could be anyone, a fellow doctor, a nurse. If there's no one there to help you, call the janitor, call the laryngoscope, please. And then you perform the endoscopy using the flexible. Okay? You see, even if you don't see it, it's like the optical stylet. You could still go beyond the view of the video laryngoscope. Okay? So you still could intubate the patient. Okay? So this is what's good with the Buffy technique. It's not that easy. The optical stylet is easier. You could do it alone. Rigid is easier to control, but short of anything, if you don't have the optical stylet, this one. So if I have a difficult case, a lot of times so that I don't do the rescue, I immediately set up for combination technique. I ready the optical stylet. If it's not available, I ready the flexible. Okay? So this technique offers fewer complications compared to the other techniques. Also, as a given in our scenario, it's a good rescue. Okay, it's a good rescue for failed flexible, a good rescue for failed VL, which is our scenario today, So just combine it, and then as proof of this publication, it's effective. Okay. I also use it for failed awake intubation because we have some patients, especially we cannot do awake because they're very uncooperative, or especially for pediatrics. This one, burn patient, small mouth opening, but she's very uncooperative. I could not even spray the lidocaine. I was trying to spray the lidocaine and she was already fighting. So I sedated her, but we lost the airway. So we couldn't ventilate. I put an oral airway, cannot ventilate. Nasal airway caused bleeding. See, this is some bleeding caused by the nasal trumpet. So combination technique with flexible, the intubation was quite straightforward. From a very stressful scenario, so it was managed quite, not easily, but properly with the combination technique. Okay. So you see the flexible scope is hard to use, right? Because you have small space. And when there's bleeding, it's hard to, sometimes even if you suction, it's hard to see if there's bleeding. But with the laryngoscope, since you're using the laryngoscope, you're lifting, you're creating more space. Okay? So when the flexible scope was there, it doesn't look as bloody anymore because the laryngoscope is there. Okay? So as I mentioned earlier, we're talking about rescue from failed VL, but to avoid failed VL, you could start the combination technique as plan A. Okay? So for like this one, especially those airway that I'm afraid that I will lose the airway after my first attempt, I do combination. So like epiglottitis, compressions, like this one, this is a tracheal compression. You could see the compression earlier in the trachea. So I'm afraid of losing the airway after my first attempt, so I just straightforward to combination technique. Okay? So what's next? So we tried the combination technique, and if it fails, that's the time I use the supraglottic device. Okay? So just show you some publication in the supraglottic device. They say it's easier to insert it if you're using a laryngoscope. Okay? So they're encouraging the use of VL and supraglottic because it gives you a higher first pass success, and then also it gives you a proper positioning, a better positioning of the laryngoscope. Okay? I mean, but on a normal day, when I'm using an LMA or a supraglottic device, I don't use the laryngoscope. Okay? I still use just the SGA, straightforward, because I'm lazy. Okay, so but in a scenario, so remember our scenario is you're doing VL, and then you cannot intubate, you cannot see. Okay? What I do is in my next attempt, okay, I'll try to figure out what will I change. Maybe I use an optical stylet, maybe I use a flexible, or if I don't have them, I revise my adjuncts, my bougie, my stylet. At that time, I prepare the supraglottic device. Okay? So after I decide, okay, I could not intubate again, I put down the ET tube, I maintain the laryngoscope, and then I insert the supraglottic device. So it gives me a higher success rate. Okay? So that's the only time I use the combination technique of VL and supraglottic. Okay? So after that, So now you're successful with the supraglottic device. What to do next? You have a decision to make. You could either proceed with the case. If you could proceed with the supraglottic device, you could say, I want to stop. I will wake up the patient. So you ventilate with the supraglottic and wait for the patient to wake up. But for example, you have to go through and you cannot proceed with just an SGA. You could also intubate through a supraglottic device. Okay? So this is basically the intubating through the supraglottic. I remember that time, a long time ago, the intubating LMA is actually in the algorithm, in a lot of airway algorithm, but they remove it. Do you know the reason why they remove it before? Okay. Because it has a low success rate. Okay, so imagine you have a very critical step, okay? But if you only have, based on study, it's 69%. 3 out of 10, you will fail. If you say 3 out of 10, you will fail, that's not that bad, right? But you have to consider this is a very critical stage. Okay, this is, as the doctor mentioned earlier, this is airway management. It's a must-do, no-fail scenario. Okay, so what will happen if we try to intubate through an LMA or an SGA and we cannot intubate? What will we do? We remove it and then ventilate again in a supraglottic, right? And hopefully we could ventilate. A lot of times we can, but also there are times that we could not. So imagine you try to intubate blindly. We cannot push it down. It means that we're pushing on something. We are causing bleeding, we're causing swelling. So when we remove the ET tube, a lot of times also, we could no longer ventilate the patient. Okay, so that is the problem with this technique. But recently, the algorithms is mentioning this again. So what's the difference? Now, they are recommending the use of a flexible scope. Okay, so they're saying if you're gonna intubate through a SGA, use a flexible scope because you increase the success rate from 69% to 96%. Okay, it's like failing 3 out of 10 to 3 out of 100. So it's a very good increase in success rate already, right? Okay. So how do we do it? Okay, so this one, I inserted the LMA I used the visual laryngoscope. Every time I do a procedure, I bag so that it gives the patient oxygen. Then I load the ET tube on the supraglottic device. Some load the ET tube on the flexible, but it's harder. So I load it on the supraglottic device. Just make sure it doesn't go out of the supraglottic. Okay? Now I'm inserting the flexible. See the flexible, I'm inserting it. It's not going directly to the airway, right? It was going somewhere else. So I have to redirect it. So with the ET tube, it will be the same. It's not going directly a lot of times in the airway. But since I'm using a flexible scope, I could see where I'm going. I could direct it. So when I push down the ET tube, it has nowhere else to go. Okay? Just there. Okay? So it's guided. Okay? Now, you have to make a decision. Should I remove the ET tube or not? If you have a short case, you could maintain the LMA. You don't have to remove the LMA. You can maintain it there. But for example, if you have you plan to have a delayed extubation, you could remove the LMA. Okay, so here I use another ET tube, so that when I pull up the LMA, the ET tube that is intubated will not go up also. So it stabilizes the ET tube. So the companies who sells the supraglottic device, they have their own stabilizer. But based on my experience, I still like using an ETT over their stabilizer. So I just use an ETT. Okay. So what are the advantages of this technique? Patient can be oxygenated during the procedure. Okay. So remember, this is a long process already. We try to intubate, we could not see with VL, we proceed to supraglottic device, we are using flexible. The good thing is, between those steps, since you have an LMA or a supraglottic device, you could ventilate the patient. Okay, so you're oxygenating. You're not worrying that the patient will desaturate. Okay. Also, if the patient, or remember, you have already tried so many steps, sometimes it's bleeding already, or sometimes you poke something around, or if it's a trauma case, there's a lot of secretion, a lot of bleeding. The LMA could isolate the bleeding from the actual airway. Okay, so we put the LMA there or the supraglottic. The bleeding is outside, so you could perform the flexible without worrying about the bleeding. Okay, and also, lastly, it doesn't require a lot of skill. Okay, it's easy to practice. After this convention, when you go back to your hospital, you could already practice this in the mannequin. Okay, and maybe tomorrow you could practice it on an actual patient. And you don't have to be good at flexible, because flexible, it's hard to learn. We have to accept that it's hard to learn. But this one, they call it the low-skilled, flexible, endoscopic intubation. Because you don't have to have a high skill level. It's just low skill. Okay? So it's very promising for the starters. Okay? Okay, so for this, they showed this, they did this technique on pediatrics. It offers higher first attempt success and lower incidence of hypoxemia. Okay? So now, let's go to the can't intubate, can't oxygenate. Okay? By this time, our stress level started from here, right? Now our stress level is over here already. Okay? So what do we do? So if we look at all the algorithms, at the end is the surgical airway. How many of you have done surgical airway? Emergency surgical airway? No? None? You guys are very good in intubating. Okay? So the thing is, there's so much different techniques for surgical airway. Okay? So what do we use? So if you look at, there are different kinds. We have the wide bore. This is the one that are offered by the companies. You have the needle crick. You have the use of endotracheal tube, like the scalpel bougie technique, scalpel finger bougie technique. And then I also included the retrograde intubation because it's also a front of neck access. Okay. So survey done by the Canadian. This I find this very interesting because these are basically the same group of people, different time. But if you ask them which one is their preferred technique, they have different answers. Probably now, if you ask them again, they will have different answers. So my point is, our decision is affected by a lot of factors. Not just our practice, not just our training, but also what we read, what we hear in events, what we see in social media. Nowadays, the most common thing that people use is the scalpel bougie. The reason for that is the NAF4 study. Okay? Now we just recently published the NAF7, but we're still talking about the NAF4. Okay? Because in the NAF4, they showed that the cannula use is actually very low. Hence, the cannula success rate is very low. Okay? But, however, why is it so? One of the reasons they've identified is, even if we're doctors, we're dealing with airway, we're very bad at identifying the cricothyroid membrane. Okay? In order to do the needle, we have to identify the cricothyroid membrane. Okay? If we don't, probably will fail. Okay? That's why they recommend the scalpel bougie over that. But however, even the Royal College of Anesthesia in the UK says that it's unfair not to label needle if we didn't consider training, proper equipment. So if we do that, maybe the success rate is actually higher. Okay? The reality is there's really no study that could say one is better than the other because we don't have that much cases. Okay? And we cannot make those studies. We cannot make a randomized control trial for the type of EFONA that we will be using. Okay? So what they are saying is the choices actually lands on you. Okay? In your institution, you could choose. But the important thing is you choose, you train for it. Okay? So the most important thing when you're choosing is for hospitals, you have to train for it. Remove the ambiguity. Meaning when someone says EFONA, everyone knows what he's talking about. Okay? So the people are not confused that it's is it needle, is it scalpel, or am I going to get a kit? Okay, there was a incident in Australia. They were asking the nurse to get the EFONA kit. And then went to the airway cart and then go back to the patient. They said, "Doctor, it's not there." "No, it's there. I'm the one who placed it there." Go back to the airway kit again. Back to the patient. "Doctor, it's not really there." So eventually, after the case, they able to manage the airway. The doctor went to the airway cart, look for it, it's there. But it has a different name. So it's very confusing. So that's why remove ambiguity. So if you want to call it EFONA, if you want to call it scalpel bougie kit or crick kit, everyone should know. Okay? What's the bottom line? For me, the bottom line is use which technique you're most comfortable with. Okay? If you're not comfortable with scalpel, if you do with the scalpel, you won't be successful with the scalpel. So, are you comfortable with the needle, scalpel, or you're more comfortable with the kits available out there? So, use whatever you want. Second is ventilation. Okay? If you have a needle technique, you need to ventilate the patient. Okay? So you have to know how to ventilate the patient because in the needle, the air goes in, but it doesn't go out. Okay? So you have to manage that. You have to have the equipment to provide jet ventilation. If you don't have that, you don't have the technique, the knowledge, and the equipment, you might be better off choosing the other technique. Okay? And next, the patient. Sometimes it's common sense. For example, if you have a patient like that, it's very easy to identify the cricothyroid membrane, right? If you have a patient like this, probably even it's hard to identify the cricothyroid membrane, and probably the needle will not reach the cricothyroid membrane. So you have to cut. Okay? Sometimes it's just common sense. Okay? So where to do it? So we've been talking about the cricothyroid membrane. Why the cricothyroid membrane? Because even though it's hard to identify, it's already one of the easiest to identify in the airway. Second, at the back of the cricothyroid membrane is the signate shape of the cricoid. Meaning, if we, just in case, go through the lumen where the patient is protected by the cartilage. Unlike if we go lower, there's nothing there but the pars membranosa. We could easily go past the lumen. Okay? So when we're dealing with difficult airway, okay, so you assess the patient. It's a difficult airway. I will use visual laryngoscope, and then after, if I fail, I'll try supraglottic. If I fail with supraglottic, I will do surgical airway. So you have to visualize that when you're preparing with the patient. Now, it's hard to identify the cricothyroid membrane when it's already an emergency. You cannot ventilate, you cannot intubate the patient anymore. So, what we recommend is to identify the cricothyroid membrane beforehand. Okay? Before inducting the patient, before giving the drugs, you could mark the cricothyroid membrane already. Okay? So this one is easy. Actually, even if you don't palpate, you could see the anatomy of the patient. But if you have patients like this, it's very hard, right? So you really have to prepare beforehand. So where is the cricothyroid membrane here? So they asked the surgeons and the ANES where it is. They said it's in the black asterisk. Do you agree? Yeah, most doctors agreed. The problem is it was on the red circle. So it's on the side. Okay? So in this case, it's harder. Okay? How do we make it easier? You could use ultrasound. Okay? So ultrasound is very easy to use. It's very easy to use to identify the cricothyroid membrane. Just last month, so we have a case. The patient was a female, very thin. From the outside, you could see the cartilages already. So my co-ANES, which was a senior, older than me, pointed at the neck, asked me, this is the cricothyroid membrane, right? And then I was looking at the patient. Yeah, it seems so. So, I always dealing with airway, he older than me. But I took the ultrasound and checked. Turns out we're wrong. Because the patient has a very prominent cricoid. The cricoid looks like the thyroid cartilage. So it means that the cricothyroid membrane was actually up the prominence, not below the prominence. And we wouldn't have known it if I didn't do the ultrasound. So even if we're very experienced, sometimes we still make mistakes. Okay? So the ultrasound, do it beforehand. Okay? A lot of people are saying, ultrasound has no space in airway because you don't have to do time to do it. But do it before inducing the patient. Okay? So that you make time for it. Not in the emergency, but on the elective part of the airway management. Okay? It increases the success rate. There was a study done, I think 2 years ago. They compared the success rate of new doctors training for anesthesia, and then consultants who was better at identifying the cricothyroid membrane. The young ones or the old ones? Based on that result, it was the young ones. But the young ones use ultrasound. The old ones use the palpation. Yeah. So it shows that it helps. Okay. And a lot of people worry. I do it at the beginning, but eventually the patient will move, right? So the skin move. Will it still be there? The thing is, it changed. Okay. But numerous studies have been done already. It shows that it will not move more than 1 cm. Okay? So it's still in that area. Okay? So meaning, rather than looking for the airway here, you're only looking for the airway here. The cricothyroid membrane. So you limit the place that you will search for it. Okay? So now, the biggest question, how to do it. Okay? Most important, position the patient properly. Shoulder pad. Never forget the shoulder pad. You have to hyperextend the neck because the cricothyroid membrane closes. Okay? So you have to extend it so you could palpate it easily. Okay? So let's start with the needle prick. So you could use a IV cannula, a syringe with fluid inside, and then I use a ETT adapter, size 3, size 3.5, depending on the brand. Okay? So perform the needle perforation of the using the IV cannula. Almost perpendicular, but a little bit pointing downwards. Okay? And then aspirate with a syringe with fluid. So you see it has to be, there has to be no resistance. Okay? When you aspirate, it has to be very easy. So the bubbles appears very clearly. Okay? See, it's very easy to aspirate. So, okay. So it's done very quickly. But here, you have to remember, this is not a permanent airway. Okay? If you don't have the jet ventilating devices, you could not maintain it. Plus, remember, you're using a cannula. It could kink, it could bend, it could break. It's very easy to dislodge. Okay? But where do I recommend this? Okay? If you have a difficult airway, you cannot intubate, you cannot ventilate, what do? If you don't know how to do it? You call the surgeon or the ENT, right? They do the surgical airway. Correct? You don't call them? Okay. You call the Opta to... so, you call them, it takes time. Okay? And then they don't do, the thing with ENT and surgeons, they don't do the EFONA. It's not the emergency FONA. They do tracheostomy. And it takes some time to do the tracheostomy. Okay? I teach surgical EFONA to ENT doctors. And I asked them how fast they could do the tracheostomy. On average, they will say 10 minutes. That's too long, right? The patient will not survive 10 minutes. Okay? So sometimes, I think the fastest that someone told me was 6 minutes. It's still too long. Okay? But if you have this, okay, what I do here is, okay, now I could connect it to the circuit. Anesthesia breathing circuit, right? I bag once, just once. Okay? The autosat will go up. Don't chase the autosat because the pulse oximetry takes time. It takes like 30 seconds, right, to be reflected. Okay? Then it will go up. I don't bag during that time. Okay? And then I open the pop-up. And then when the patient starts to desaturate again, that's the only time I give again. And then it will go up. So that cycle will take like 2 or 3 minutes. Enough for the patient to be oxygenated. And then that will give you the time to call the surgeon to do the surgical airway, the tracheostomy, while the patient is still being oxygenated, not desaturating. Okay? So for me, that's the scenario I use it. Okay? Also, for example, you have a you could decide, you have an option not to continue the case. You will wake up the patient. Okay? So most of the time you use rock, right? Rocuronium, you could reverse. Okay? You reverse. Do you think the patient will breathe after reversal? Immediately? No, right? Because you gave propofol, you gave fentanyl, you still have to wait for the patient to metabolize those. You have to wait for them. So that will take a few more minutes. So the muscle relaxant is reversed, but the patient is still apneic. Okay? So this technique, it's very traumatic. You're waiting for the propofol and fentanyl to wear off. You do surgical, you do scalpel. So it's easy just to do the needle, right? After the procedure, once the patient wakes up, barely notices the puncture on the neck. Okay? So those two are my, such the scenario I use the needle. Next is scalpel bougie technique. So there's two technique using the scalpel and bougie. There's scalpel bougie technique and scalpel finger technique. Okay, so let's start with the scalpel bougie technique. Remember this number, 6, 10, 14. Okay, size 6 ET tube, scalpel blade 10, French 14 bougie. Okay? The sizes are important. If you experience sometimes different sizes, it's harder. Okay? So how do we do it? So same, hyperextend, then you cut if the patient is fat, you cut a vertical incision roughly 6 cm. And then after incising the skin, you do finger dissection. Okay? You could, because finger dissection, because if you do scalpel dissection, you could incise the thyroid cartilage. Okay? And then once you've identified the cricothyroid membrane using your finger, you get the scalpel again, and then you make a horizontal incision. Okay? After horizontal excision, you twist it vertically. Okay? And then I use the scalpel as a guide. So while inserting the bougie, I push it against the the blade going in because I know the blade is inside. Okay? And then just railroad the ET tube. Okay? So the difference in scalpel bougie, the scalpel finger bougie is once they incise the cricothyroid membrane, they remove the scalpel, place their finger, and then guide the bougie towards the hole. Okay? My problem with that technique is sometimes it's hard to identify the hole again. You remove the scalpel and then you look for it and then you're trying to guide it. I was trying to do it in some animal lab. It's harder because sometimes you lose the opening. Unlike with the scalpel bougie technique, the blade is there, it's in the hole, just follow the hole. Okay, put the bougie. For me, it's easier. I mean, you could try, but that's my experience that I'm sharing. Okay, want to see the video again? Okay. Okay. This is in my YouTube channel, so you could just later I'll give you the link for my YouTube channel. The tutorials, the videos are there, so you could view it there. So some ENT will say, don't worry about the thyroid cartilage. So just try to access the airway. It's better to have a living patient with a injured thyroid. We will just repair it. So that's what the usual, when I'm dealing with the ENT surgeons, that's what they usually say. Okay. So this one, it's relatively not bloody. Sometimes it's bloody. So it really depends on the patient. The distribution of the blood vessels is very unpredictable in the neck. Okay. Now, how many of you have done retrograde intubation? None? This is my favorite technique before the onset of video laryngoscope, before the before the hospital had money to buy. Okay, so how do we do this? You have a needle. Okay. I use a 2B needle from the epidural kit. Okay. Same thing like a cricothyroidotomy. Okay. And then I have a syringe with a fluid. I aspirate. And then once I've identified the airway, I remove the syringe and then thread the epidural catheter. Okay. Now the catheter will go up. Okay, once it's up, you could grab it with the forceps from the mouth. Sometimes it goes out directly on its own. So for like this patient, the catheter is led in the mouth, and then you just tie it on on the Murphy's eye of the ET tube, and then you pull. Okay, when you pull, it's not going anywhere but the airway. Okay. Okay, so some of the anti-retrograde, they say, when you do this technique, the airway is the ET tube is just here. Okay, it's just here. So it's not good that it's just here. But remember, it's just a soft catheter. You could push it down. Okay, you could push down the ET tube. Okay, so it's okay. Okay, so the important thing is when you're doing surgical airway, when you decide to do the EFONA, you have to make time for it. Okay, what's the most common problem nowadays is you do EFONA when the patient is already desaturating. Okay, if that's the case, you no longer have time to perform EFONA. Okay, because the patient is starting desaturate, you're panicking, you're trying to do this. Definitely you don't have time. Okay, so what is recommended is you do EFONA when you cannot, you have no choice to go through and you cannot awaken the patient. Okay, so waking up the patient is not an option. 2 is when you've done everything already. Okay, it means that I tried the VL, I tried combination technique, I tried supraglottic, and then I still could not intubate the patient and I could not awaken the patient. So I have to do EFONA. Do the EFONA at that moment. So don't be like the first video that I showed, laryngoscopy. The patient is still not desaturating, laryngoscopy. Okay? If you've done everything, proceed to EFONA. Okay? So remember, the biggest obstacle of doing something is the mental barrier of doing it the first time. You haven't done it before, so it's hard to do it. So it's best to practice. Okay, how do we practice surgical airway? Okay, you start by practicing to identify the cricothyroid membrane and puncturing it. Okay, me, I always do. I as often as I can, I do transtracheal block. Okay, how do you do transtracheal? So when I'm doing awake intubation so I do transtracheal block. It's the same thing as cricothyroid needle crick. Okay, you're just using a different needle. Okay, so when you get used at puncturing the cricothyroid membrane, it's a good step forward on practicing. Okay. Next is just a reminder, ball pen doesn't work. Okay? They did several studies already. It doesn't work. Okay? So in Hollywood, they always use a ball pen. Yeah. Okay, like this one. But always looks nice, right? Okay. So Airway, just a reminder, never give up. Thank you very much. If you want to see the videos, they are in YouTube, so you could take a picture or scan the QR code over there. Okay.